we have more control over our feelings than we think. But what's going to get in the way of our ability to control that is things that create a chemical response within the body. So for instance, all your cortisol inducing activities or your cortisol inducing chemicals that we add to the body, like nicotine, some foods that would boost your cortisol or get your adrenal response going, like your caffeinated energy drinks, your coffees throughout the day. As well as that, if we don't know how to regulate our nervous system, if we don't know how to relax, if we don't allow ourselves the ability to do some relaxation techniques, and if we're caught up in the cycle of always having to be on the go, always having to be busy, or having a fear of missing out if we don't step back, these are all the ingredients that come together that would mean that we've got less of a chance of managing our stress. So combining all of these aspects is a brilliant thing to do, especially if you are able to tap into some of the techniques which I've put you through in these videos. You will start to notice a difference. You'll see that I'm out of breath doing this. But that's all part of it. When we go out and we exercise as well, we're tapping into some of the feel-good hormones, and it also gives us a chance to have a better perspective. We suddenly have more clarity when we're out in nature and we've been moving the body, the lymphatic system's getting rid of any toxins, any inflammation, and the oxygen is increased within our body. Our brain's able to function better, especially if we've altered our diet and we're hydrating properly and we're not relying on sugars and caffeines to get us through, because they will heighten that stress response. They will make us hypersensitive and we'll be on amber alert and much more reactive. And if we're able to tweak all of these things in our life, add in more exercise, add in more nature, add in more vagus nerve calming techniques or activities, then I promise you, you will start to notice a difference. It might take a couple of weeks, it might take a month or so, but little by little is always the best way, because you'll find that it's more sustainable. But there are some things that you will have instant effects of, such as, you know, that feeling of overcoming that bad morning or that feeling of lack of motivation. We finally decide to just do it anyway, overcome that unfamiliar or that uncomfortable feeling, or that feeling of fear, I guess. Face a small fear and do it anyway. And you know, at the other side of that, it's almost like an instant gratitude. It's an instant feeling of boosted confidence, and it's an instant feeling of ease, clarity, and being able to make better decisions, because we've taken ourselves out of our normal everyday environment. We've taken ourselves away out of situations that it's hard to see the woods through the trees, and we're looking in from a different angle. And it's in those moments that our intuition tells us exactly the kind of changes, or exactly the kind of decisions, or exactly the kind of choice that we have to make with certain parts of our lives. And we can make those decisions confidently because we've tapped into our true selves. We've got through all that sludge, all of these false sort of feelings and responses and bodily states which are masked. They're masking that true version of us. And when we peel those layers away, our true selves are underneath, and our true selves will give us the answer. So it's let go of all these crutches, all of these escapism tactics, and listening to your inner voice, which will guide you always. So we're going to move on to the next part, which is unravelling all of these layers that are detrimental towards us being able to manage our stress much better and having more resilience. So some of the things that we're going to cover, I'm hoping that you'll take time to think about. And also if you can grab some paper and a pen or a pencil, and we can go through this next exercise. So really what we're going to be doing is we're going to be trying to find out what our limitations are, what our obstacles are, what's getting in the way. So we're looking at things like what's stealing our time, what's stealing our focus, what's stealing our nourishment, our peace, our productivity and our energy. So for instance, time, it can be poor time management, but it can also be some areas where we've just been in a repetitive cycle. We've not really had that conscious realisation of certain factors in our life that are stealing time from us on a daily or a weekly or monthly basis. And this all adds up and it disallows you that headspace. It disallows you that time to really reclaim what's yours in your life in terms of your thoughts, your feelings, because wherever that time is going, you are feeding that area of your life more and more the more time that you give it. So I will urge you to look at some ways in which you can take back some of that time that's getting stolen away, either from, other situations. It's maybe getting taken away from distractions. Maybe you're easily distracted, you have difficulty focusing on certain things, you're easily influenced by others, you are getting, sucked into other people's drama, which would come into the peace section there. Asking yourself, whose energy is it that you are holding? Whose drama is it that you're getting involved in? And do you necessarily need to give it that time, that focus, that energy? And do you feel that it is obviously having an effect on your peace in your life, your ability to have contentment? Also, things like focus. It's really easy to be falling into a rabbit hole with all sorts of things that's going on in our world today. People want to speak out about things, and we have been encouraged to have an opinion. But what's happened is it hasn't really been balanced out with teaching us that sometimes that opinion is unnecessary, it's perhaps not kind, and it's going to have an effect on your psyche, on your thoughts, on your feelings, and it's needless. So it's looking at ways in which perhaps you can realign and make sure that your focus is on good things, that it's focused on your intentions and the person that you want to be and the contentment that you want to have in your life. So the paper exercise that we're going to do is going to reinforce that, because through various practices, through different learnings, different cultures, even ancient techniques and rituals and ceremonies, there has been great power found in writing and putting things into a physical action as well. So not only are you trying to work out perhaps what's going on in your head and you're thinking your way out of thinking, you actually have to break this cycle at times and look in from a different perspective. And that will be an ego's perspective. You'll probably find maybe in previous videos that I used to wear an ego, a mad, massive ego necklace. But that was my way of just reminding myself to have the ego's perspective. So the ego's perspective comes from another shamanic practice really, where they look at certain animals to draw from them whenever required. And the ego obviously has a high view compared to everyone else. That ego is able to look down on absolutely everything, and it's also so sharp with its ability to see things. And having that ego in thought and in practice, it allows you to just remind yourself to remove yourself from a situation, look down on it, see everything intricately and how it all interlinks, and understand things better. And having that perspective allows you to bring yourself forward into making better decisions. Also knowing that there's not always a need for argument, and there's not always a need for resolution. It can be a case of seeing things as they are, accepting them as they are, and working out how you are going to find your place in all this. And if you look at it from a different perspective, you might be able to find your place in that more easily without, the same triggers, without the same consequences to your emotions when you look at it in a different way. So us putting things down on paper is going to really give you scope to see all of the things that might be getting in the way of you being that best version of yourself, that more stress-free, although I've got to obviously use that term loosely. Stress comes in so many different forms, and it's more enabling you to take on certain situations, certain predicaments, certain scenarios, certain feelings, and not placing so much power in that and finding your calm in the chaos. So all of these things that I have just prompted you to look at, what's getting in the way of these things. Nourishment could easily be things like you find that you've just not got the time, or you might feel that you're driven to foods that are going to give you a quick burst of energy, foods that are going to give you some comfort, they're going to make you feel better, but it's all short term, it's a short term fix, and then the guilt comes afterwards or the crash comes afterwards. So these things can be highlighted and you can recognise what's getting in the way, and the majority of the time we do find that 90% of the situations in our life we have more control over, and it's just finding ways to place it differently in our minds and having a map, having a plan that we can resort to and keeping that vision in mind. So in order to come away from all of these things, we're going to actually have to visualize what we want from our life. And what we want from our life will give us a clearer indication of what no longer fits and no longer aligns with what we are looking for in order for contentment.
So let's talk about some of the ways in which stress can become a problem within your life. First up, got to start with the foundations. Your resilience is going to be based on what you've been through already within your life. Some of that can have a positive effect. It's almost like, when someone says, oh, I've been through it all, this isn't going to bother me. Someone can actually have more strength and more resilience to triggers because of their past experiences, and they've grown from that, and therefore they feel stronger, whilst others might find that it causes a negative effect, and it's almost like when you drip feed something, each drop builds up. And usually what happens is when we get to crisis point with stress and we react in a very, very intensive way, it's usually because we have had to manage so many things in the background, and it's almost like when you're on that hamster wheel, you keep going, and it eventually gets to a point where you can no longer tolerate, and it comes out in physical ways, it comes out in emotional ways, and it comes out in impulsive ways. So we're going to hopefully help you identify some of the triggers, identify how we can manage our stress better, and identify any barriers which we might have, and also learn about setting limitations and boundaries and almost creating a plan for your life, something that you can look at and use as your guide daily. So some of us might have ongoing stress, such as they are carers, they are within a caring capacity, and your role with Cornerstone no doubt entails really evaluating your daily life in order to facilitate supporting others. But we've also got adverse events, unexpected events that happen in your life, such as bereavement, house moves, loss of job, other triggers which can be quite overwhelming, and you're not fully prepared for that. And it's at these times where we feel that it's almost like someone's turned the simmer up to a boil, that we identify that before it gets to boiling point and implement some strategies. First up is going to be lessening the load in your daily life if you can. So it's freeing up time and freeing up headspace, but also supporting your body to deal with cortisol and triggers and fight or flight to be reduced. So some of the things that we spoke about in previous videos was about the physiological and the physical implications of you being able to tolerate situations or energies which feel a bit more intense. So number one, looking after your physical body is a must. So that's looking at your diet and making sure that you're not leaning too far into the zone of cortisol inducing activities. So that's looking at things like your caffeine intake, how much you're relying on sugary foods, sugary snacks, chemical foods, processed foods. It all sounds so textbook, I know, and it sounds like it wouldn't really cause that much of an effect. But believe me, when you start to see how the body all integrates, you'll understand. And when you're looking after your gut health, your hormonal health, through being more careful about what you take in to your body, through eating, through drinking, through smoking, and lowering your nicotine, because nicotine, for one, ups your cortisol levels. It might not feel like that at the time that you're having a cigarette. It might feel like the opposite effect, but it in fact heightens the amount of cortisol that's pumping around your body, and cortisol is the stress hormone. So it's going to really prompt your body into get into that fight or flight kind of mode, which leaves you feeling more on edge, which leaves you feeling more reactive, more fast paced, and also it can make you feel almost like you're having palpitations, lightheaded, and an increase in circulation, your shallow breathing. So what you want to do is you want to, as much as you can, reduce the things that could be adding to that, and that's looking at what you put into your body, as well as what you're allowing your mind to be exposed to. And it's easy to say, don't expose your mind to stressful situations. We know that there's so many things in life that we have to be exposed to and we aren't necessarily able to step back from, but it's knowing how to deal with that and making sure that you claim your own energy. Much of the stressful energy that you're taking on is perhaps not yours. It belongs to another person, another situation, and another environment. And our personality traits might dictate how much we take on the stress of others or how much stress we take on of an environment. So it's resetting that as well and asking yourself, whose emotions are these? Are these my emotions, or have I absorbed them from others? Am I contributing to dramatic situations that are not actually anything to do with my life, or they might not necessarily be my business? So it's re-questioning things that you're allowing yourself to be exposed to, or that you are exposed to and you are perceiving the stress, rather than recognizing and observing but not absorbing. So the next thing would be looking at your triggers and identifying when you're triggered. So identifying when you're triggered can come in a whole multitude of ways in which you're experiencing stress, and everyone is different. So for one, I'll give you an example. You might feel a bit more restless. You might feel that you're leaning into some habits such as nail biting. You might pick at skin. You might be someone who kind of pulls at their hair. Someone who becomes extra restless, so perhaps they can't keep their feet still. They feel that they have to tap. They have this nervous energy within their system. They're moving their legs, they're jerking their knee while they're sitting down. All of this is a sign that there's heightened stress within the body. Other things can be feeling a bit more numb and being unable to laugh and find humour in things that you used to. You might find that you want to isolate yourself. You don't want to be sociable. You want to express yourself in ways that can be overly venting, because although it's good to express ourselves and to find a support network and maybe talk it out with the friends or trusted sources, if you feel that you're in a pattern of having to vent and that energy keeps you stuck in that restless, frustrated, irritable or helpless state, then we want to break that cycle and we want to find new ways of dealing with that. If you have any health limitations and you've got ongoing illnesses, I know very well that this can really affect your daily life. And it's things like your pain levels, your ability to have slept well, your energy levels, your other symptoms that can play a huge part in how you're going to feel on a daily basis and how much more you're able to tolerate on top of this. So looking at the root causes, some which might be out with your control, it's a case of, there's no quick fix, there's no pharmaceutical cure. But if you're able to find ways to lessen your pain levels, increase your energy, look after your body as best you can, look after your mind as best you can, you're able to then deal with stress better because these are not engulfing you and overwhelming you as much. So some of the ways in which you can do that is looking at where your energy is going to and being able to ration your own energy, taking things at a slower pace, being realistic about what you can do and setting limitations so that you're not pushing over your limits and then having to have huge recovery space at the other side of it. Also looking at ways in which you can manage your pain better. So your inflammation levels, making sure that you're hydrating, making sure that you are taking pain medications in an effective way, ensuring that you're limiting how much pain you have. Maybe more movement in your life could be crucial to flushing out some of this inflammation for flexibility's sake. Maybe some of the things that you're adding to your life are adding to your pain, such as your alcohol, your nicotine, your foods that could be exacerbating some of these symptoms, particularly if they're related to gut health or related to inflammation within the body. So all of these are really things that you have to consider because they do cause a cycle within your life. And if you can learn to identify some of these things that haven't been so helpful, removing them from that cycle, you'll find perhaps you can get through things a lot better. Here are some of the barriers as well to you being able to manage stress well. Obviously, we live in harder times. Many people are struggling with finances. And if this is something that is going on in the background, then of course it can be stressful. And I would say that if you're avoiding that, that can make things a whole lot worse. There's absolutely no shame in coming forward and reaching out to others. There are so many ways in which others can be suggestive or point you in the right direction. Some of these can be organisations as well, such as Money Matters. You can get debt advice through Citizens Advice. There are so many different ways, and unless we have that understanding, we're going to amplify this in our own brains. Coming from a person who's been there themselves, I have had a ripple effect in my life from having health problems from a young age to the point where I got into a lot of debt. I say a lot, it was minimal compared to someone that's been lavish, and spending all their money in luxuries. It was more a basic needs kind of situation, and I was finding it really difficult. And we know that that can cause a problem because it's easy to say, well, let's manage your stress in other ways, forget about that right now. But your access to certain things is limited also. But we have to balance that out with the things that we do have within our control that don't actually mean that you need the finances to do so, which is what this video and other videos will be suggesting for you. But first things first, for financial worries, reach out. Whether you are going to get yourself sitting down, set time aside to really map things out on paper, looking at your outgoings, looking at all the ways that you can save money, starting to build a better budget, and contacting those people that you have to, being honest. We live in a day and age where, it feels like it's going to be something that is not taken positively when you contact companies and you say you cannot pay. But we live in times as well where they have to now accept that you're unable to pay a certain amount and work with you to pay an amount which is more reasonable for you. So working out an instalment plan with these companies. But if it's all too much and you want to consolidate it, you can also find ways to get a debt management plan or start the process with a form of sequestration or bankruptcy, which again always is frightening, but these days as well you can find that that could be the way forward for you when you weigh things up. Something which can be detrimental to your credit history for maybe 4-5 years might actually be the best way to go, because it will free up your worries and enable you to improve and move forward in your life today, rather than sludging through for years with this worry. So is it for the gains or is it for the gram? It is a difficult thing to do, especially if you do have a phone addiction, whether you are in denial of that or whether you're quite aware. A good way of getting yourself to come out of that dependency, of sharing every experience, is just to set yourself a limitation. So for instance, although I do post some of my experiences, I would say there's only about 10-20% of them actually go online, and that allows me to feel that I have some of my life being sacred, some of it being private, but it also feels that I don't have this constant urge that I haven't posted that yet, I've done this, right, I need to post that now. So you get out of that way of feeling that everything in your life has to be journaled or catalogued online. And the more that you allow yourself to leave your phone at home, or set that rule that you're going to go do something that could be an amazing experience, but allow someone else perhaps to take one picture, or don't take any pictures and don't post about it whatsoever, and see how you feel about that. If that feels uncomfortable, if that feels like that's something that's just far too hard to resist, that temptation of having to put it on, then sit with that, and you know that you have something that needs to change, that you have been caught up in that validation wagon and it's time to jump off, and find your own method of transport, which is about living life and not feeling that it has to be documented every step of the way in order for your life to be fun and valid. Let others think whatever, and if others judge by their standards, then that is something that is within their realms of changing, because it isn't a realistic thing to feel that if someone was doing something so amazing then it would be online, or if someone's life was so hard that would be online too. And we need to remind ourselves of this, and that can be a good reminder just to level things off at some point and know that we don't have to always be on top of promoting when we're going through great times or promoting when we're going through hard times. That it's simply there, it is a tool, and it doesn't need to be used 100% of the time. And if it's not used 100% of the time, then even better, because you're giving yourself the headspace, and it's not another thing that's adding to that headspace that you have to get on and post 24/7.